conviction. I remember he did categorically mention that. What's your take on this?
Jesse, there could be some elements of political sympathy, but really that should not be the focus of why this issue should interest Kenyans. The matter in question is how we ensure that we set clear precedents to be able to secure and safeguard the office holder, because as I said earlier on, there is a deputy president, Mheshimiwa William Ruto, today. Tomorrow it could be anyone, including yourself or myself or my co-panelist in studio. How would we want to ensure that we safeguard and secure that particular individual, their families, their property, etc.? And so the question, in my view, should move from looking at the political aspects, which indeed is the key focus of what is happening now. And from what probably would be happening is the DP's people might also be interested in setting up certain themes, like my co-panelist said, to ensure that we profile him, to ensure that we set, for instance, we give him free PR. Like right now, we are speaking about what happened, and none of his players, maybe my co-panelist is a member of his strategy team, I am not, are interested in seeing how the different things that happen around the deputy president are used to campaign for him, to profile him, and to set him up as a key contender in the presidential discussion. But that could be the political way of looking at it. From a governance and institutional perspective is to look at how we set clear precedents and avenues to ensure that the office holder of the deputy president and the presidency actually is secured, is safeguarded, including their property. Remember, Jesse, that the guarding or the security of the property of any of these office holders is one, institutional, which means that the Inspector General of Police has to set up a certain number of security personnel and security officers to safeguard those installations or those particular property. And that is why, for instance, even for judges, for other constitutional commissioners, we also have APs guarding or GSU guarding their private homes. But if you want security beyond what is stipulated within the set institutional frameworks, you actually do it on request. And so as the CS said, and I agree with the team that went to Parliament, that the kind of numbers we are talking about, 257, Jesse, 257, goes beyond what I think is normal. And if it is upon the deputy president who wants to be the president of this republic, I think he needs to reconsider these numbers to ensure that, as some of the parliamentarians that were speaking in Parliament, that the amount of security that the DP has even goes beyond the total number of what they have in their counties. It could be true, I am not so sure about that, but it sets a very clear, it gives us a very clear opportunity to see how security mechanism and management is done in this country and how people's interests are also put on the table. But I think that goes beyond service delivery, it goes beyond the security of the common citizens, and is something that I don't think the president, or rather the person that I want to be president for me as a common citizen, as a voter, is supposed to have. So the people around the deputy president need to take very clearly what the CS spoke about. This is a CS of Interior. He's a person who knows who has what number of police officers. And so I don't think that he lied to the public, despite the information that we are now receiving from the handlers of the deputy president. If this is true, then I think the DP's people need to reconsider this and look at how this plays around security and how the implications play within the eyes of the normal citizens. In my view, Jesse, it is abnormal.
Okay, so Ngunjiri, as we finalize on this particular matter, just yesterday, some of them mentioned there might be a lacuna in terms of the law, number of security officers manning VIPs. Do you think this is something we should look at going forward so we don't have perhaps misuse of officers in terms of protection of government officials and the likes, the DP notwithstanding?
I think that everything is based on the available evidence on the ground, okay, and no prejudice should be made to any office. I would dare anybody in this country to ask questions, and specifically so, and let us get, for example, the list of the number of officers allocated to each and every of the high-ranking member of government, so that we can contrast whether all these issues that are being now brought to the public domain actually make any relevance. I think that even as we proceed at looking at, for example, a cap of the number of the security officers that can be deployed to guard a VIP, it is important to have in mind that every time there is a politicization of this issue, we'll always lose the most important point here, which is that the security of each and every Kenyan is as important as the security of those that are in government. But then, those that are in government, at least because of the risks that they can be exposed to, if at all they do not enjoy certain privileges like the number of officers, I think that the people of Kenya will understand how this process goes. But I think that is a decision that is having, or is at the discretion of the police service, the National Police Service, through the IG.
All right, so a lot more details in today's dailies, as earlier mentioned. Make sure you're adequately informed. But in terms of governance issues, the National Assembly just yesterday approved the 4 nominees to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC. This comes amidst concerns raised by a section of ODM legislators seeking to have IEBC Chair Wafula Chebukati, Commissioners Boya Mulu and Professor Abdi Guliye step aside for presiding over the 2017 general election that was nullified by the Supreme Court. Our senior reporter, Jeff Kirui, with the details.
Barely a year to the 2022 general election, the IEBC is now fully constituted after Parliament approved 4 nominees to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission pending swearing in.
This House approves the appointment of the following persons as members of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. 1. Ms. Juliana Wonge Cherera, Mr. Francis Madenge Wanderi, Ms. Irene Cherop Masit, and Mr. Justus Abonyo Nyangaya.
If they can deliver a credible election, then there will be peace. If they deliver a doubtful election, we don't want to contemplate what will happen.
But even before the dust on the lack of quorum in the commission settles, a section of legislators from the ODM party have been agitating for the resignation of the 3 current commissioners, IEBC Chair Wafula Chebukati, Commissioners Boya Mulu and Professor Abdi Guliye.
So I leave it to the conscience of those 3 commissioners that before you blame anyone, ask yourself that you presided over an election that has actually set a history in this continent. Then do you think morally it is justifiable for you morally to preside over another election?
Let us allow IEBC to do its work. Let's have an election that is free, fair, and Chebukati and his 2 colleagues are not going anywhere. For those who feel they want to tell them you are wasting your time, they will conduct the next election.
The 4 IEBC nominees will replace Roslina Kombe, who resigned just before the repeat poll in 2017, Connie Maina, Margaret Mwachanya, and Dr. Paul Kurgat, who resigned in April 2018.
I want to just pray that this time we get it right. We get commissioners who will put the country first, that we will have a commission that will not preside over an election, that after that election, we end up with the kind of disruptions and the kind of chaos that we have witnessed.
If you're a commissioner, don't put the country into a crisis. You must uphold and protect the position given to you by the Constitution.
Na tunaamini hawa walioteuliwa wataweza kuonyesha maadili ambayo yataweza kuzuia ghasia na michafuko ya kisiasa, hasa wakati wa upigaji kura ama wakati watu wanavyojiandikisha mambo ya kura.
For now, the focus will shift to the position of the CEO, which is yet to get a substantive replacement. This after former occupant Ezra Chiloba was ejected and his position held by Marjan Hussein in an acting capacity.
The House stands adjourned.
Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
The 21st.
All right, so it seems all systems are go for the electoral agency, which after the speaker will communicate to the president gazettes them, after which they will be sworn in by Chief Justice Martha Koome. So it's all to do with the required quorum. And Osido, this is reprieve, barely 11 months to the general election. The IEBC can now make major decisions and prepare for next year's polls. Did we get it right this time in terms of the commissioners, bearing in mind how sensitive the elections can be in the country?
Jesse, I believe that we got it right, especially looking at what has gone on in this particular process, where, for instance, we have had to advertise for commissioners and people to apply for this office, and the kind of gruesome task that the committee that the president put in place went through to be able to get these four individuals. So what I believe that needs to happen is for Parliament to support the commissioners and the commission itself, and the kind of narratives that we already seeing coming from ODM. Some of them are quite promising, some of them are disturbing, especially given the fact that we have to renew and replace commissioners every after an election is taken place. The IEBC did release a report actually on the performance of the 2017 elections, and I believe that that particular report is what has informed the electoral preparedness body's interest in the 2022 elections. And so we need to see Parliament supporting IEBC, particularly when it comes to budgetary allocations, because remember that every time the chairman of the commission speaks, he always decries the fact that the commission is not properly financed or resourced. So Parliament, even insofar as they sit and vet and approve these particular commissioners, they also need to think through the infrastructure that the commission needs to put in place and ensure that there is proper goodwill support even for these new coming commissioners, because you can have the best individuals, Jesse. Some of those people, like Justice, we have worked with him in the civil society. He's a gentleman who's shown a lot of interest in proper working of institutions, engagement with stakeholders. And so I believe and hope that some of these good lessons that he has picked from the civil society and his wealth of experience engaging with actors and stakeholders will really inform how IEBC works and transform how IEBC also engages with stakeholders, including the other three individuals, Irene, Masit, Juliana, and also Mr. Francis. So depending on how Parliament and the executive support the commission, there is no reason whatsoever why IEBC should not give Kenyans a credible, free, fair, transparent, and accountable election for 2022. Despite the lessons that we have learned, we have 11 months to put things in place. The kind of nominations that we have seen IEBC also conducting have tested the kind of mettle and the preparedness of the commission. And just honestly, there is no reason whatsoever why IEBC should not return that particular hope and trust to Kenyans when they conduct the 2022 general elections.
Okay, Ngunjiri, one would assume the litmus test for these commissioners would be how they conduct next year's elections in terms of integrity, trust, and credibility. But as you add your voice to the entry facing these commissioners, perhaps do you support the issue around Wafula Chebukati? Some members of parliament don't seem to be content with him holding that position of IEBC chair. Is this witch hunt?
I think that because of the current nature of our politics, which are always brutal and savage, sometimes you find people who have not been able to guarantee their vested interest in, for example, a commission like IEBC will be in constant calls and threats to make sure they remove certain office holders so that, in a way, they can be able to sneak in somebody perhaps who they think will be favoring them in that election. However, I want to argue that as a country, we must have faith in independent institutions because we've mandated them the responsibility to deliver us a credible, free and fair general election in 2022. If we want to play a match today, Jesse, we cannot be the ones, for example, to say, no, this referee is not perhaps black like we are. and therefore he or she must not come. We must always be able to always abide by the rules.
Okay.
And this is by accepting the reality that it is not all the times that all our interests can be covered by certain decisions that are made for the general good. So this case, I think that it boosts public confidence and dispels any doubt that the election is to happen in 2022. I think that right now stakeholders are supposed to be preparing themselves to engage in issues of processes and what shall happen now that the commissioners are in office. Because that mistrust that we saw in 2017 is the one that rocked us into the chaos that we saw. And to avoid an escalation of that, people must start engaging right now.
Okay, yeah, definitely. The preparations towards the general election, even as we get closer, are bound to get even more hectic. We'll definitely keep a close eye on the developments around the electoral agency, but more details on that particular approval by the Parliament in terms of those commissioners designed to take over positions at the IEBC. Let's talk about other matters, Osido, and it seems August was the deadliest month since COVID-19 outbreak in the country, where there were 795 reported deaths compared to 297 in July and 462 in June, where hospitals even admitted more COVID-19 patients in August compared to other months. So we're still in the thick of it in terms of the vaccination process in the country. But what can you note? What stands out for you, even as we clamor for more numbers to turn up for the mass vaccination drive?
So Jesse, what stands out for me is the vigilance that Kenyans have taken this particular process, which also includes the urge and the interest to want to get vaccinated, because we continue to see very long queues of Kenyans moving into vaccination centers to be able to go and get this vaccine. And so that really, in my view, presents an opportunity for the citizens to want to be engaged and their interest in making Kenya secure insofar as vaccination is concerned. I don't think that the Ministry of Health has done very well in terms of public education and ensuring that citizen interest is elated. Because if you look at the kind of conversations that are going on, especially around issues of stigma of the vaccines, some of the challenges or narratives around why people are decrying these vaccines, those are things that, in my view, the Minister of Health needs to come out very strongly to dispel some of these narratives and some of these assumptions, so that people are guaranteed about the security and the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, including the kind of vaccines that we have in this country, whether it is AstraZeneca, whether it is Johnson's and Johnson's, and all the other vaccines that the government of Kenya has set for the people of the Republic of Kenya. So we continue to see a lot of interest in the ministry to want to engage with citizens.
Okay.
And the citizens have also showed their interest, as I said, in the numbers, but there's a gap which is really based on public education. And I also believe that some of these deaths, Jesse, could be because of the kind of crowds that we continue to see, because, for instance, our schools are on. We have people convening despite the guidelines that have been issued of about 30 or 40 or 50 people per meeting. And even if you attend these meetings, for instance, where we are at right now, hotels and the tourism industry has worked very hard to ensure that there is a lot of adherence to the COVID-19 protocols, including social distancing. People are masking up, people are sanitizing and washing their hands. And so it shows that the public is also interested in working together with the government to deal with COVID-19, Jesse.
Well noted, Osido. Ngunjiri, add your voice to this as we finalize.
I think that as we move on, we have seen some of the problems that we have in the health sector. And I think that as we continue having the discourse of universal suffrage, or rather universal healthcare, we must always be conscious to the fact that in future we cannot be able to ascertain whether such a pandemic might come in a different way. And so we must always be prepared at any given time. And the government, because the basic existence of government is to protect life and property. And so any time that we talk of matters of health, we must make sure, because of the lessons that we have learned from the COVID-19, that in the counties where we have a lot of problems, and even in the local dispensaries, we must make sure that we are able to avail at least the best of the services that the people of those localities can be able to access. Again, I also say that for the way forward of government and Kenyans, first, Kenyans must accept that they have a responsibility to take care of themselves, and this is through taking COVID vaccines. At the same time, the government also has a responsibility to avail the vaccines to the grassroots at the lowest level, where somebody doesn't have to, for example, pay 100 shillings so that they can go to a bigger hospital to get the jab. I think that the vaccines can be availed to the public, like the way we see doses of BCG and malaria being taken to households.
Okay, well noted. Gentlemen, that's a proper footnote. Thanks for your deliberations right here on Morning Express. Joined in studio by Kariuki Ngunjiri, political analyst. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And Kevin Osido, a governance expert via way of Zoom. Thanks for your input on the show. Gentlemen, we'll leave it at that, but make sure back at home you grab yourself a copy of the dailies, Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard, the Daily Nation as well, covering extensively some of the stories we've just talked about, including others touching on the state of the education sector, where there seems there are tough new rules for setting up schools. Make sure you grab yourself a copy to be adequately informed. Let's take a look at yet a different story now, where the High Court sitting in Nairobi has dismissed an application by 6 police officers seeking the exhumation of bodies of 2 brothers who they allegedly killed in Kianjokoma, Embu County. The officers had wanted the bodies exhumed for another independent autopsy to be conducted. Moige William with that story.
It was a major blow for the 6 police officers when their efforts to have the bodies of the 2 brothers Benson Jiro and Emmanuel Mutura exhumed to pave way for another autopsy were rejected. High Court Judge Justice Weldon Korir dismissed the application, saying they were not merited. The officers had wanted the autopsy conducted in the presence of their lawyers and pathologists. The Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, or DPP, while opposing the application, noted that exhuming the bodies will cause untold severe psychological pain and suffering to the family members who are already dealing with the pain of losing 2 sons and unclear circumstances. Further, the prosecution opposed the request for the court to order for a public inquest to be done before the suspects face charges. According to the DPP, the application by the officers lacked basis. Earlier, the 6 police officers failed to take plea before Justice Daniel Ogemba after their lawyers withdrew from the matter on grounds that they had not received any further instructions from their clients. The matter was deferred to a later date.
We are doing plea